You're suing your own daughter? Diane didn't flinch. I'm documenting my role as her mother. Across the mediation table, Marissa's eyes welled, but the ledger stayed open. Every tuition bill, every midnight ER visit, every erased photo, now filed under Exhibit A, maternal history. This wasn't estrangement. It was evidence. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The fork in Diane's hand paused midair, just an inch above the white linen napkin on her lap. Aunt Diane? Marissa said with a breezy smile, one hand possessively hooked around her fiancé's elbow. She helped raise me. The words floated out like steam from a cracked teapot, casual, dismissive, and scorching if you listened closely. Diane swallowed back the metallic taste that rose in her mouth and smiled, small, composed, professional. A paralegal for 32 years. She knew how to smile through depositions and death threats. Tonight wouldn't be any different. She glanced down the long mahogany table, eyes grazing the polished silverware and the crystal place cards etched with Mom and Dad in delicate gold script, one for the groom's parents, none for her. No seat of honor, no toast, just a chair and a demotion. The groom's mother, bedecked in sapphire earrings and soft Chanel pink, leaned toward Marissa with a glass of wine. We brought something for you both. It's a tradition in our family to pass down legacy pieces when a new couple forms. She opened a small velvet box. Inside was a gold pocket watch, monogrammed and pristine. Luke's great-grandfather carried this into court every day of his judgeship, she said. Diane watched Marissa's eyes go glossy. Oh my God, thank you. This means everything. Everything, a word she once reserved for Diane when she was 8 and scared of thunderstorms. Now Diane watched from her unclaimed place, her name stripped to something decorative. Back home, the zipper of her boots sounded like a verdict as she pulled them off. The house was quiet, classical music from the Bluetooth speaker humming faintly under the low-lit chandelier. She poured a glass of Cabernet, not for celebration, but as witness to the moment she stopped pretending. The wine was dry, her throat drier. She crossed the room with slow precision, opened the bottom drawer of her antique desk, and pulled out an accordion folder. Inside, Marissa's birth certificate. Mother, Diane M. Caldwell. Father, declined to name. Diane slid out the paper slowly, the edges browned with age, the ink still sharp. Next came the legal guardianship documents, the tuition loan co-signatures, and the handwritten ledger she kept for 4 years while working 2 jobs just to afford Marissa's apartment near campus. She ran her hand over the worn spiral notebook. The wine sat untouched beside her. Flashback, Marissa at 6, coughing in a cold apartment Diane could barely afford. Diane, holding her all night, using her own coat as a blanket because they couldn't run the heat too high. At 11, Marissa's first ballet recital, Diane watching from the back of the auditorium, still wearing her office shoes, her toes cramping. 16, when Diane canceled her first vacation in 12 years because Marissa needed help with her first car insurance payment. 19, the tuition bill that came with a 0 grace period. Diane pulled money from her 401k and told no one. 22, when Diane stood at graduation with an iPhone camera and a box of tissues and watched her daughter smile for the photographer. With her boyfriend's parents. Diane was cropped out of every final frame. And now? She was Aunt Diane. The next morning, she stood by the window, hair pinned, blouse crisp. Sunlight crept through the lace curtains and caught the side of her face like a camera flash. She picked up her phone and dialed. A voice answered on the second ring. This is Catherine Morgan. Catherine. It's Diane Caldwell. A brief pause, then warmth. Diane. It's been a while. You remember what you told me when you left the firm? Diane said, tone flat as iron. That if I ever needed to open a file on someone, you'd do it yourself? Catherine exhaled. I do. Diane's voice didn't shake. I need to open a file on my daughter. Silence. Then, I'm listening. Diane turned her face back toward the sun. Her smile was clean, sharp, the kind you wear to war. Diane sat at her dining room table, the morning sun outlining her like a silhouette from an old legal portrait. The accordion folder from the night before was now fanned out like a deck of high-stakes playing cards, loan documents, tax forms, notarized agreements, all bearing two signatures, Heron and Marissa's. She had spent years telling herself none of it mattered, that the money she poured into her daughter's life was an investment in love, in stability, in motherhood itself. But now, stripped of even the courtesy of being called Mom, every unpaid cent gleamed with new relevance, like unpaid dues in a contract she never signed with her heart. She reached for her calculator. The keystrokes clicked sharp across the quiet room. Tuition balance covered after scholarship shortfall. $28,600, 2014 Subaru Forester. Title and down payment, $12,400. Co-signed student loans, currently still active, $51,000, 401k. Penalty withdrawal for Marissa's apartment deposit. $18,000 credit card consolidation she never got paid back for. $6,800. 2 personal loans to cover emergencies and internships, $30,900. Total, $147,700.32. She exhaled, slow and sharp. Then, with a steady hand, wrote across the top of a fresh legal pad, "Assets to reclaim." The phone rang. Marissa. Diane stared at the screen a moment, then slid her finger to accept. "Hello? Thanks for coming last night." Marissa's voice was breezy, smug in that effortless way only the willfully oblivious could manage. "Everyone loved you. Luke's parents said you were so elegant." Diane's lips curved into a slow, practiced smile. "That's sweet of them." No apology, no acknowledgement, no correction, just gracefully erasing her. Diane reached under the table, quietly tapping record on the call app she'd installed years ago when she was still working law cases with high-risk clients. Marissa kept talking. Something about the venue, something about fittings. Diane tuned it out, her eyes drifting to the framed graduation photo on the bookshelf, Marissa in cap and gown, Diane half cropped out. "I have to run," Diane finally said, "but thanks for calling." She hung up before the next word could land. Her smile vanished the moment the line disconnected. She called the bank directly, used her old contact, Reina Patel, now a senior legal liaison in wealth management. "Reina," Diane said, tone clipped, "I need information on legal options for liens and asset holds, particularly involving joint debt and unpaid personal loans with family." A beat. Then a familiar laugh from the other side. "Diane Caldwell, I always said you'd retire for maybe a week." "I'm not unretired," Diane replied. "I'm just collecting." Reina cleared her throat. "Send me what you've got. I'll keep it quiet." Flashback, 17-year-old Marissa sobbing in Diane's lap. "He doesn't even want to see me." The rejection letter from her absentee father had arrived that morning, short, typed, with a cold signature and no return address. Diane held her daughter's trembling frame against her chest. "You are not disposable. You are not nothing." "I just wanted him to care." "He doesn't," Diane said, brushing back her hair. "But I do. I always have." She didn't cry then. She saved her tears for the bank the next day, where she applied for another loan she couldn't afford. Back in the present, Diane sat straighter, pressed her pen to the yellow notepad again. Below the assets column, she added a new heading, "Emotional collateral, not collectible, not forgiven." Her laptop dinged. New email, Catherine Morgan, Esky. Subject, RE, legal standing body. "Yes, you do have legal standing. Want to discuss strategy?" Diane reread the email from Catherine twice, then slowly folded her laptop shut. "Yes, you do have legal standing. Want to discuss strategy?" The words hung in her mind like a gavel over soft wood. She felt no rush of revenge, only the clarity of a clean ledger. But clarity doesn't erase ache, it just makes it measurable. The ache followed her that afternoon when she stopped by Marissa's condo, a quiet, calculated visit, no agenda spoken, just a small velvet box resting in her purse like a second pulse. The door swung open. Marissa looked effortless, loose linen pants, glossy hair pinned back, the faint scent of bergamot wafting behind her. "Hey," she said, blinking. "Did we have plans?" "No," Diane said, holding up a bakery bag. "Brought lemon poppy seed. You used to like it." Marissa smiled faintly. "Luke's gluten-free now, so we mostly don't do pastries, but come in." Diane stepped inside the modern gray and gold living room. Everything was curated. Boucle chairs, abstract prints, and not a single picture of her in sight. But a gilded photo frame on the shelf did hold one image. Marissa with Luke's parents at their lake house, champagne flutes raised. Her future, crystallized in glass. "They're giving us the down payment," Marissa said offhandedly, placing glasses of sparkling water on the coffee table. "As an early wedding gift." Diane sipped carefully. "How generous." "They're also covering the honeymoon, Tuscany. We leave the morning after." Diane's hand moved to her purse. She set the small velvet box on the table and opened it. Inside was a delicate locket, rose gold, faintly worn at the edges, still luminous, engraved with a single date, November 14th, 1994. "The day I brought you home," Diane said quietly. "I was 31. You were 6 pounds and angry at the world." She smiled faintly. "Just like your mother." Marissa stared at the locket. Her smile dropped, replaced with something unreadable. She leaned back. "They're giving me something custom, something new. It fits better with my dress." Diane blinked. "It's not meant for your dress. It's just not really the look I'm going for." There it was. Erasure, spoken casually. Shame, gift wrapped in modernity. Diane closed the box slowly. "What's wrong with vintage?" Marissa didn't answer right away. Then, under her breath, she muttered, "It just doesn't feel like me." The silence afterward was thick enough to cut. Diane looked around the room once more. No trace of her. Not in the furniture, not in the photos, not even in the stories Marissa told anymore. She stood. "You know," she said gently, "when you strip away the past, what's left doesn't always shine. Sometimes it's just blank." Marissa didn't respond, but her jaw tightened. At the door, Diane turned back. "If you don't want my name, you won't want what's tied to it either." By evening, Diane was back in her study. The velvet box sat closed beside her keyboard. She called Catherine. "She refused the locket," Diane said without pleasantry. Catherine made a low sound. "That was your grandmother's, wasn't it? And her mother's before that. 5 generations." "Damn!" Diane's voice was cool, measured. "If she wants to reinvent herself, she doesn't get to cash in on the foundation she's walking away from." "Understood. Let's draft a notice of intent. Assets, support, co-signed accounts. I want it formatted clean, formal, sharp. You want it to land hard." Diane didn't flinch. "I want it to land true." Outside her window, the wind stirred the trees, and the neighbor's porch light clicked on. Motion-censored justice. Diane reached over and turned the locket box to face her. She tapped the glass once, like a judge tapping order into a courtroom. She had handed over her history, and her daughter called it inconvenient, so now she would hand over the invoice. The next morning, Diane's cursor hovered over the email subject line. Notice of intent, Caldwell v. Caldwell. A clean header. No emotion, just precision, just like she'd been taught. She remembered drafting similar documents for strangers, angry ex-wives, cold executors, small-town lawsuits where property lines and family ties blurred like fog. But this one? This one carried her daughter's name. As she clicked send, her heart didn't pound. It settled, like a courtroom door swinging shut. She opened the manila folder beside her. It was thicker now. Tuition invoices from State U car loan statements, cosigner liability paperwork she'd kept out of habit, tax documents showing how she'd filed Marissa under dependent status until she was 24, despite Marissa claiming she was on her own. Even the 401k withdrawal confirmation, $18,600 labeled Emergency Rental Assistance M. Caldwell. Diane had liquidated her retirement for that. Marissa had sent her a candle and a card in return. "Thanks, Mom. I'll pay you back someday." someday, never showed up. Catherine, her attorney, called that afternoon. I'm drafting the civil claim for unjust enrichment. We'll frame it around material support and implied contract. The numbers are strong. So is your documentation. Good, Diane said. Her voice was a measured calm, the kind surgeons use before the first incision. You still want to pursue mediation first? Yes. Diane stared out the window. Let's give her one clean chance to face the facts. Understood. You'll have a draft by morning. That night, Diane sat alone with her tea and her phone. She opened her voice memo app, scrolled through the archives and found it. Marissa's voice from 2 years ago, tearful, raw. You're all I have, Mom. I couldn't do this without you. Thank you for always catching me. Diane played it twice, then hit save. She wouldn't use it unless she had to. But memory is a fickle witness. She'd learned that in courtrooms. Recordings were better. Later, in the glow of her desk lamp, Diane typed in Marissa Caldwell wedding blog. There it was, banner photo of the couple on a sailboat, wind catching the veil just right, bio paragraphs for the groom's siblings, for Mom and Dad, not even a mention of Diane. Then a comment caught her eye, posted by the groom's mother. So lucky to have such a sweet new DL and her amazing aunt. A beautiful addition to our family. Diane stared at the screen for a long time. Then she walked to her stationery drawer. She pulled out thick cardstock embossed in gold. She hadn't used it since her retirement. She wrote, "Congratulations on the engagement. Real families leave real footprints. Diane M. Caldwell." She sealed the envelope. No return address. The next morning, Catherine's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. Mediation is scheduled. 3 weeks from now. It's optional, but I strongly suggest we document any refusal to appear. Diane nodded. I'll be there. So will the evidence. As if summoned by fate, her phone buzzed with a text. Marissa. What the hell are you doing? You can't sue your own daughter? Diane stared at the screen for a full minute. Diane didn't respond to the text. She just stared at it, the blue message bubble glowing against the quiet pulse of her lock screen. You can't sue your own daughter. As if motherhood came with immunity clauses. The irony? Legally she could. And she would. She tucked the phone into her drawer and reached for the next file. Catherine's voice on the other end of the line was crisp and precise, just like the forms Diane used to draft in her prime. There's another angle here, her attorney said. We can assert gift tax misrepresentation on the co-signed loans. You shouldn't have been liable for default interest if it was intended as a loan, not a gift. Diane pulled her reading glasses down, scanning the IRS Form 709 her attorney had emailed. Won't that trigger a review? It might, Catherine admitted, but it'll be Marissa under the microscope, not you. Diane's hand paused over the mouse, a faint tremble, not of uncertainty, but weight. She used my name, Diane said quietly. Now I'm using it too. Click. Submit. 3 days later, Catherine called again. Her tone was sharper. We just got a notice. The wedding venue's lien application was processed last month. They used your name. What? They used your co-signed credit history to secure the deposit. Your name is still on her educational credit file, which made your score count toward the venue's pre-approval. Diane pressed her hand to her temple. So they got a discounted rate using my record. Without disclosure, yes, that's fraud, Diane. A long silence. Then Catherine added, If you're ready, we may have grounds to freeze all related funds until the civil review concludes. Diane exhaled slowly. She thought of her bank account, what was left of it, of the calls she'd made in her paralegal days, watching mothers cry on speakerphone as assets vanished under someone else's choices. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table. Do it. That night, Marissa called, once, then again, then 5 times more. Voicemail after voicemail. Mom, Diane, what is happening? Please, just talk to me. Diane didn't answer. She set the phone face down, picked up her wine glass, and walked into the den. Flashback, 2005. A younger Diane, in flannel pajamas, sat on the edge of Marissa's twin bed. The girl was pale, sick, shivering under blankets. Mono, midterms, missed orchestra practice. Diane read from Little Women, voice soft but steady. I've got the key to my castle in the air, but whether I can unlock the door remains to be seen. Marissa's eyes fluttered shut, a faint smile on her chapped lips. "Don't leave," she whispered. "I won't." And she didn't. Not for 18 years, present day. Diane wiped a tear from her cheek, then another, but they fell silently. She looked around her house, still, ordered, and hers. "I did everything right," she whispered. "Even this." Later that week, a ping lit her inbox. Subject line: Summons accepted. Caldwell v. Caldwell. Civil Asset Review, 14 days. She didn't blink. She opened a fresh document titled Schedule of Recovery and typed the first line: "No one owns your past unless you let them." The knock came just after 7, sharp, unapologetic, like a bill collector or someone who believed their anger earned them entry. Diane didn't flinch. She placed her tea down, still steaming, walked to the door with the same measured grace she had when delivering subpoenas. She opened it just enough to see her daughter's outline silhouetted in dusk. Marissa's eyes were rimmed red, not mascara-smudged sobbing, but sharp-edged fury. She didn't ask to come in. "You filed a suit," she hissed. Diane met her stare, calm as stone. "I filed a record," Marissa's voice pitched higher. "Against me? Your own daughter?" Diane opened the door fully. "You're not calling me mom anymore. Why should I act like I am?" Inside, the air pulsed with silence and lemon oil polish. Diane didn't offer water. Marissa didn't sit. "I don't get it," she snapped. "What is this, revenge? You were fine with everything until now." Diane turned, slowly, eyes cool. "Number I was silent. That's different. Silence builds interest." Marissa looked confused, then wary. "You wanted a clean slate?" Diane continued. "I want clean books." She reached into a drawer, pulled out a folder, and laid it on the kitchen counter. "I itemized everything, every cent, loans, tuition, rent, car insurance, groceries when you were in grad school and couldn't make it until Friday." Marissa opened the folder. Her face twitched as she scanned the pages. Dates, receipts, transfer confirmations. She pushed it back. "I can't pay that." "I'm not asking for it tomorrow," Diane said, voice like glass under pressure. "But I'm not pretending anymore." Marissa exhaled sharply. "I can send you something. Not all of it. But maybe $500 a month?" "No." "Why not?" Diane straightened and back. "Because strangers don't pay each other under the table. If we're severed, we do it cleanly. You want me out of the picture? Fine. But don't use the frame I paid for." Marissa's mouth fell open, but no words came. "I want full documentation," Diane said. "Full restitution. Public acknowledgement. Are you trying to ruin my life before my wedding?" "I'm documenting who helped build it." Marissa turned toward the door, lips trembling, eyes glassy with confusion and contempt. "Everyone's going to think you're a mother who stopped pretending," Diane finished. Marissa didn't respond. The door shut gently behind her, but the silence it left was immediate and nuclear. The next morning, Catherine emailed a draft. Itemized settlement demand. D. Caldwell, V. M. Caldwell. Co-signed loan repayments, $78,432. Rent and utilities, subsidized, $23,019. Emergency fund transfers, 2011 to 2020, $32,145. Interest, plus legal fees, pending calculation, public correction clause, required. Diane didn't blink as she reviewed it. She made 2 red pen edits, scanned it, and sent it back. No hesitation, no apology. The whispers came by Friday. A cousin emailed, "I don't know what happened, but I hope you two fix it." A niece posted a cryptic Facebook status about entitled elders. Diane left it all unread, unbothered. She dusted her fireplace mantle, watered her plant, and filed away every new document in a folder labeled Proof Over Pleasantries. Let them pick sides. She had picked her own. Saturday afternoon, her phone rang. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. Same number. She answered. A pause. Then a man's voice, smooth but nervous. "Ms. Caldwell, this is Luke, Marissa's fiancé." Diane said nothing. "I know this is out of bounds, but Can we talk? Still nothing. Just us, he added. Off record. Diane walked slowly to the window, looked out over the late spring afternoon. Kids riding bikes, a sprinkler catching sunlight like diamonds. She pressed the phone to her ear again. I'm listening. Diane arrived 15 minutes early. She always had. Job interviews, court filings, first dates, even labor. Punctuality wasn't about time, it was about control. The glass conference room sat empty, its table a long, polished slab of walnut flanked by leather chairs that hissed softly when touched. She set her folder down like a final exhibit and smoothed her slate-gray blazer. Behind the frosted door, she heard steps. 2 sets. She didn't rise when they entered. Luke nodded. Awkward, cautious. Marissa followed. Her face was powdered, but her eyes betrayed the same redness Diane remembered from playground tantrums. Back then, it meant scraped knees. Now? Exposure. Catherine, Diane's attorney, extended a cool but courteous handshake to both. Shall we begin? Marissa opened with sweetness. Diane, this doesn't have to be hostile. Diane offered a polite smile, one she used during client mediations. Number it doesn't, but it does have to be clear. Luke shifted in his chair. We just want to settle this privately, Marissa continued, without making it messy. I agree, Diane said, sliding the folder forward. Here's my definition of clean. She opened it. Tabs labeled education, housing, credit, interest, emotional damages, crossed out. I left that one blank, she said. Couldn't find a calculator bitter enough. Marissa blinked at the stack. This is intense. This is accurate, Diane corrected. Catherine leaned in. We are prepared to negotiate payment structures, but full acknowledgement is non-negotiable. Marissa's charm cracked. So you want me to post something online? To embarrass myself? Diane raised a brow. You posted the ant comment in front of 70 guests. You can manage a paragraph. Marissa's voice wavered. Why are you doing this to me? Diane's reply came calm and measured. You already did it to me. I'm just naming it. Luke cleared his throat. Can't we find a softer resolution? Diane turned to him for the first time. Are you offering legal counsel now? He paled slightly. No, just trying to keep peace. She folded her hands. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the resolution of debt. For a moment, no one spoke. Outside the glass, someone poured coffee. A printer clicked to life. The world moved forward. Inside, everything held still. Catherine finally slid a paper across the table. This is a proposed settlement. It includes repayment terms, a statement of acknowledgement, and a clause requiring no future claim against Diane's estate. Marissa read the header and froze. Her fingers curled the paper. No. Catherine looked up. Excuse me? Marissa shoved the paper back. This is legal blackmail. Diane didn't move. This is adult accounting. Marissa stood. I won't do it. Luke stayed seated, eyes flicking between them like a man watching 2 storms fight for the same sky. Marissa stormed out. The door slammed hard enough to rattle. The blinds. Luke lingered, then gave Diane a look she couldn't quite read. Half regret, half retreat, and followed. Back in the silence, Catherine looked at Diane. Do you want to revise the offer? Diane shook her head. No. You know what comes next. Diane smoothed the edges of her folder and exhaled. Discovery. That night, she lit a candle by the window and pulled her wool cardigan close. Not for warmth, just a habit. Outside, the wind tugged the last yellow leaves off the trees. She didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the pain had roots now. It was planted, labeled, and growing into something steady. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Thick linen paper, formal seal, gold-embossed return address from a law firm Diane knew by reputation alone. She opened it slowly, blade sliding across the envelope like a quiet warning. Inside, a single-page letter from the groom's family attorney. Subject: verification request regarding the civil claim between Diane Caldwell and Marissa Caldwell. First sentence: we've recently become aware of a legal dispute. Before continuing any financial gift or co-investment, our clients request confirmation of the events described in the public filing. Diane folded the letter once, neatly, and set it on her desk. Her smile wasn't triumphant. It was satisfied. The letter from the groom's family attorney stayed on Diane's desk for exactly 13 minutes. Then she scanned it, attached it to an email with the subject line, "Requested verification, all materials enclosed," and hit send. Attached were 27 pages, signed promissory notes, bank transfers with her initials as co-signer, scanned receipts for everything from tuition deposits to down payments on furniture, a notarized affidavit from her former employer showing the 401k withdrawal she'd made the year Marissa lost her scholarship, and photos, dozens of them. Marissa at 5 on Halloween, dressed as a lion, Diane's coat wrapped around her shoulders. Marissa at 17, red-eyed on the couch after the letter from her father, unopened and returned. Marissa in her cap and gown, with Diane beside her in a department store dress and $11 heels that blistered both feet. Every sacrifice, every cent, every moment, organized, dated, real. By the end of the week, Diane's lawyer called. "They've pulled their offer for the honeymoon condo." Diane closed her eyes. "I figured. They're asking questions now, serious ones. Apparently Marissa said you were an estranged aunt who re-entered her life a few years ago." Diane let out a sound that was half laugh, half grit. "She rewrote the whole book. I'm just returning the footnotes." Marissa's damage control came fast. Diane's cousin texted her. "She called me crying. Says you're twisting things. I didn't know what to say." Her niece emailed, "Can you send me your side? I just want to understand." Even Diane's former neighbor got a message. "She said I was bitter," Diane told her sister Margaret over tea, "that I was jealous of her happiness." Margaret stirred her cup, lips tight. "You're not bitter, Di. You're detailed." Diane leaned back. "She wants to rewrite the past, but she can't use my ink." That afternoon, Catherine sent over the draft for the asset conversion and public correction motion. It was meticulous, just like Diane had taught her back when she was a new hire fresh out of law school. It demanded restitution of funds, acknowledgement of Diane's legal guardianship from birth through college, and a mandatory public correction, online and in print, to clarify Diane's parental role. The motion also outlined a clause. If Marissa refused, Diane would pursue full civil litigation with inheritance implications. Diane read it 3 times, then signed it. She needed air. She tucked her scarf tighter around her neck and walked through her neighborhood, the kind with trees named after presidents and sidewalks cracked from too many winters. As she turned the corner, a gust of wind sent leaves skittering across the pavement like scattered receipts. She passed a school just letting out. Children poured through the gates in clumps of laughter and backpacks. A little girl ran up to a woman waiting on the curb and jumped into her arms. The woman kissed her forehead without asking questions, without keeping score. Diane smiled faintly, not because it was sweet, because it reminded her of what it used to feel like. When she got home, the voicemail light blinked. Catherine's voice came through clear. "Marissa wants to meet. Alone. She says she's ready." Diane accepted. Diane waited in the cafe 15 minutes early, back straight, coat still on. She chose a booth in the corner. Her lawyer's advice had been clear. Neutral ground, public setting, nothing off the record unless it was signed. Marissa arrived late. Tears were already in her eyes as she slid into the seat opposite, one hand still gripping her phone like it could protect her from the conversation. "Thank you for meeting me," she whispered, voice barely above the espresso machine's hiss in the background. Diane didn't smile. She nodded once. "You asked." Marissa started, then stopped. "I panicked, okay? I didn't know how to explain you to them. Luke's family, they're so traditional. They don't understand complicated. I thought I could just simplify things." Diane folded her hands on the table. "By erasing them." "I didn't mean it like that." "You meant it exactly like that," Diane said, tone even. "You didn't want to explain that your mother wasn't a picture frame and a casserole dish. that she was messy and tired and working 2 jobs so you wouldn't have to feel poor. Marissa's eyes filled again, this time not from rehearsed guilt, but something heavier. Real. I was ashamed, she admitted. Not of you. Of how I let the story become easier without you in it. The air between them felt different. Still bruised, but not actively breaking. Diane reached into her purse and slid out a crisp folder. She placed it on the table like a final exam. Intent doesn't undo damage. Inside was the formal settlement, restitution terms, asset acknowledgement, legal affirmation of Diane's role from birth to emancipation, and the clause, Diane would cancel all court action if every condition was met, public and private, no partial grace, no performance apologies. Marissa looked down at the pages, hands trembling. I thought you might hug me, she said, voice cracking. I came here hoping for that. Diane exhaled through her nose. I used to hope for things too. She offered Marissa the pen. It hovered between them like a match about to drop. Marissa signed, not like someone caving, like someone waking up. When it was done, she closed the folder herself and pushed it back toward Diane. I'll follow through, every word. I swear Diane finally took off her coat. Her blouse was sharp, her earrings simple. She looked not like a mother reclaiming something, but like a woman who had never lost it. You have a choice now, Diane said. Become the woman who broke me, or the woman who built herself. They rose together. No hug. No tearful reconciliation. Just 2 women, one walking forward, one walking away. Later that night, Diane returned home. The silence of her living room felt earned. She poured a glass of water, not wine. She didn't want to dull anything. She opened her laptop to scan the signed documents into her files, and paused when she saw a new email subject line, Podcast Feature Request. Invisible Mothers Series. Are you open to sharing your story? She stared at it, still holding her breath. Diane didn't react when the notification buzzed her phone. She was making tea, watching the kettle rumble like a distant train on old tracks. But when the chime rang again, once, then twice, something in her chest said, Look now. It was an alert from her bank. Incoming transfer, $14,000. The first restitution payment, labeled plainly, Settlement Disbursement, Installment 1. No apology in the line, just a transaction. Cold, correct, complete. She set the mug down without sipping. Later that afternoon, a knock at her door startled the silence. A courier, envelope in hand. Diane Caldwell? He asked. She nodded. The envelope was heavier than it looked. Inside, her mother's antique locket and a velvet pouch with the pearl earrings Marissa had borrowed for college graduation and never returned. Diane exhaled as she unfolded the tissue paper. The locket clicked open like a hinge that had been waiting to breathe. Inside, 2 tiny photos, her and Marissa, both young, both unaware of what they'd one day become to each other. There was no note. Only a return address. Not Marissa's, the groom's. That night, her laptop pinged, a social media tag. There it was. A photo of Diane and Marissa, staged and glossy, taken years ago in front of a bookshelf in Diane's den. The caption read, Grateful for the woman who raised me. We've had our chapters. But I never forgot the first one. It had hundreds of likes. Diane stared at it for a long moment. She didn't like it, didn't comment, didn't share. She simply saved a screenshot, dated it, and added it to her legal archive. Then she opened her ledger and wrote, Payment received. Heirlooms returned. Narrative revised, temporarily. A week later, she was seated in a podcast studio with soft gray walls and microphones suspended like satellites. The producer offered her a bottle of water. Diane declined. She wore a charcoal blazer and a silk scarf tucked precisely at her neck. Calm, controlled. The host, Carla Torres, leaned in gently. We're honored you agreed to share your story. Are you ready? Diane adjusted the mic. I've lived through depositions scarier than this. Begin when you're ready. The red light flicked on. Carla spoke into the silence. Today's guest is Diane Caldwell, a woman with a story so many mothers, unfortunately, know too well. Diane raised a hand, polite but firm. If I may, Just Diane. No qualifiers. Let's not dilute what I am with titles I had to fight to keep. Carla blinked. Of course, just Diane. And with that, it began. For 48 minutes, Diane peeled back layers like legal briefs, tuition receipts, sleepless nights, birthday parties with only one parent, and how erasure doesn't always look like a door slamming. It often sounds like laughter across a table where your name isn't called. She talked about the moment she was introduced as Aunt, and how betrayal didn't bruise, it branded. Motherhood is a choice, she said, but so is dignity. And mine didn't come from being her mother. It came from reclaiming that title when she gave it away. At minute 35, her voice cracked. Just once. She didn't apologize. The silence afterward hummed like a held breath. Carla leaned closer and said softly, "This is going to echo." When the interview aired, Diane received emails from strangers, messages from quiet corners of the internet, adult daughters, long-ignored mothers, even a family court clerk from Oregon who wrote, "I play this episode when I need to remember why I chose this work." Diane read every word. Then she opened a new browser tab. She transferred $3,500 from her account and launched the Ledger Project, a micro-grant for women 50-plus financially strained by estrangement. No therapy required, no forgiveness packaged in, just cash, clarity, and acknowledgement. Her tagline was simple: "You don't owe silence to people who borrowed your life." That evening, the podcast hit 20,000 downloads. Diane was slicing an apple in her kitchen when the producer texted, "Most listened to episode this season. The comment section is a chorus. You've given people a name for the quiet." She leaned against the counter, eating the apple slice slowly. Savory, sharp, real. The mail arrived the next day. Among the circulars and utility bills was a thick cream envelope, expensive stationery, her full name written in precise cursive on the front. Return address? The groom's family estate. She turned it over, pulse steady, hands sure. Then she opened it. The letter from the groom's mother had been written in the kind of penmanship that didn't need to beg for elegance. Diane read it once, then again. It didn't ask for sympathy, didn't issue apologies. It simply said, "You taught me more about love and restraint than others do in celebration. If you choose to attend the rehearsal dinner, your seat is beside mine." Diane folded it carefully, placed it in a drawer next to her property deed, and circled the date on her calendar. That Friday, she dressed slowly. No costume this time, no armor, just herself. Black sheath dress, silver locket, returned but unworn. Instead, she wore a brooch shaped like a key, tucked at the neckline like punctuation. The rehearsal dinner was in a historic brownstone downtown, ceilings high and walls lined with framed sepia photographs of strangers from centuries past. A violinist played in the corner. The table glowed with candles and tension. When she stepped in, heads turned, conversations hushed. Then, "Everyone," Marissa said from across the room, her voice clipped but clear, "This is my mother, Diane." The word didn't echo. It landed. A few guests exchanged looks. The groom's aunt blinked twice. The planner nearly dropped her pen. But the moment moved on, and Diane stood tall inside it. She took her seat next to the groom's mother, who reached out and lightly tapped Diane's hand under the table. One gesture, no words. Marissa, seated 2 spots away, avoided her gaze. But Diane didn't chase it. The dinner unfolded in polite increments. Courses served, champagne poured, laughter erupting in brief curated bursts. Marissa told a story about how she and her fiancé met. He chimed in with a joke about their first disastrous cooking attempt. When toasts were invited, Diane stood, softly, slowly. She didn't raise a glass. She just cleared her throat, took a breath, and said, "I won't speak long. Most of you don't know me. Some of you think you do." Her eyes flicked once, just once, toward Marissa. "But for 29 years, I raised a woman who knows the value of revision and the cost of forgetting the original draft." A few polite chuckles. One chair creaked. Someone coughed. She smiled. "I'm proud of the woman she's becoming, and I wish them both a life full of memory and grace." No applause, Just respectful silence. It was more than enough. She sat down, folded her napkin, and sipped her water like the night had always belonged to her. She didn't stay for dessert. As she stood to leave, Marissa caught up to her near the coat rack. "You didn't have to come," Marissa said. "I didn't," Diane replied. Pause. Marissa looked down. "You spoke well." "I always have," Diane said. "You just forgot to listen." Another pause. A deeper one. Then softer. "Thank you for not making it harder." Diane placed a hand on her shoulder. Not warm, not cold, a simple presence. "I'm not here to punish you," she said. "Just to stop protecting you from the truth." Marissa nodded. They didn't hug, but they didn't turn away either. At home, Diane poured a small glass of rye and opened her jewelry drawer. She didn't wear the locket, just placed it back on the soft velvet lining like you would a finished sentence. She stared at it, not because it held anything, but because it no longer had to. She smiled, not because it was fixed, but because it was finished. The next morning, she went out to water the herbs on her front stoop. And there it was, a box, weathered, familiar, tied with ribbon the color of old ink. Inside, an old leather photo album. The cover cracked slightly at the edge, her handwriting inside the front flap. Marissa, years 1 through 7. No note, just the past. Returned. Diane set the photo album gently on the dining table, the ribbon pooling beside it like punctuation at the end of a sentence she never expected to reread. She didn't open it, not yet. Not because it scared her, but because she already knew every picture. The soft fringe of Marissa's baby blanket, the gap-toothed grin in front of a 4th-grade science fair trifold, the Christmas photo where she'd been cropped out by the printer's border, just a mother's arm visible, holding the girl up from behind. It wasn't about nostalgia. It was about proof and closure. The following morning, she put on her reading glasses, brewed a second cup of dark roast, and laid out 4 file boxes on the rug. Each one was tagged in her neat, restrained script: medical, education, guardianship, personal. They looked like trial exhibits. Except this trial was over. She took her time. Tax returns with her name signed on Marissa's tuition line? Shredded. Lease agreements where Diane had been the guarantor? Scanned, then shredded. There was something holy about the whir of the shredder. Confessional and final. Only one file remained untouched. Marissa, 1989 to present. It was heavier than she remembered, the weight of documentation, of memories that had receipts. Inside were birth certificates, custody agreements, apology letters, Mother's Day cards scrawled in crayons and gilt. She turned to a fresh page and wrote in firm, deliberate script. Settled, fully repaid, emotionally uncollected. She clipped it to the front. This file wouldn't be shredded. It would be archived, not for revenge, for record-keeping. Later that afternoon, Diane got a call from Liz, her former colleague at the courthouse. "I swear," Liz said, "some of these kids think power of attorney means being able to text in all caps." Diane smiled. "You're still at the senior clinic? They're begging for help. You interested in educating the next generation of daughters who think their mothers are estate plans?" Diane paused, staring out the window where wind brushed against the hydrangeas she'd planted alone last spring. "Tuesdays," she said, "and every other Thursday." After the call, she climbed the attic stairs and returned with a sealed cardboard box labeled in pencil, M, Playroom. She hadn't opened it in years. Inside, she found a music box shaped like a carousel. Marissa used to turn the crank with sticky fingers until the song warped. A tea set missing half the saucers, a copy of The Velveteen Rabbit, pages soft from bedtime retellings. Diane added one new line across the top of the box, just above her younger handwriting: "If she ever becomes a mother." She resealed the lid with slow, steady hands. No tears, no trembling, just history. Preserved. That evening she lit a candle on the windowsill, not for mourning, but to mark the end of a long audit. The flame flickered against the glass as night pulled its dark curtain across the quiet room. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, the scent of lavender wax rising like a memory she wasn't afraid of anymore. Then her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She turned it over. a single message. No emojis, no punctuation flourish. Just plain text. Can we have coffee sometime? Just to talk. Marissa. Diane didn't reply. She let the flame keep burning a while longer. Diane arrived early, as always. She chose a booth near the window, corner seat back to the wall, facing the door. Years of litigation had trained her to never sit with her back exposed. You never knew where the next hit might come from, figurative or otherwise. She didn't order yet. Just a glass of water and a porcelain cup of black coffee she didn't intend to finish. Across the table sat a yellow folder, sealed, thin, empty really, but its presence made her spine straighten. Outside, the weather was indecisive, clouds thick but undecided on whether to rain. The street glistened faintly, as if remembering a storm that had passed or one that hadn't quite arrived. At exactly 10:04, Marissa walked in. No sunglasses, no entourage, no curated smile. She looked younger without all that armor. Or maybe just less rehearsed. Her blouse was too thin for the weather, and her nervous hands tugged at the cuffs as she scanned the cafe. Their eyes met. Marissa gave the faintest nod and approached. Diane didn't stand. She didn't reach. She let her daughter arrive on her own terms. "Hi," Marissa said softly as she slid into the booth. "Good morning," Diane replied, calm as glass. A pause stretched between them, not hostile, just careful. Then Marissa spoke. "I wanted to say thank you," she began. "Not for the money, not for any of that." Diane tilted her head. "Then what for?" Marissa exhaled. "For stopping. For not letting me keep rewriting things to protect my pride." Diane said nothing, but her fingers relaxed around her coffee cup. "It took me a long time to realize what I did," Marissa continued. "Pretending you were something less, it didn't make me stronger. It made me smaller." Diane looked at her daughter, studying the weight behind her eyes. This didn't feel like performance. This was something else. Grief, maybe, in its most honest form. Acknowledgement. "I wanted so badly to be this new version of myself," Marissa said. "Clean, self-made, but you don't get to erase your foundation just because it embarrasses you." Diane nodded slowly. "You were never the embarrassment, Marissa. Just the editor." Marissa's voice broke. "It wasn't hate. It was shame. I didn't know how to merge the world I came from with the one I thought I wanted." Diane placed her hands flat on the table. "You have time to decide who you want to be, but the future doesn't clear the debt of the past. It just compounds interest." There was silence again. Outside, a mother lifted a toddler into a car seat with the muscle memory of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Diane watched them. Marissa did too. When their eyes returned to each other, the edge had dulled. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Marissa said. "Just the option to be different." Diane leaned back. "You don't need my permission for that, but you did need the boundary." Marissa nodded. "It taught me who I was becoming." A waitress approached. Diane waved her off gently. Marissa took the hint. They didn't talk about the settlement. The paperwork was signed, the terms clear. This meeting wasn't about numbers. It wasn't about justice. It was about something quieter, recognition without repair. As they stood, Marissa looked unsure whether to reach for a hug. Diane simply offered a faint smile. Some bridges didn't burn, they just narrowed into footpaths you could only walk alone. That night, Diane sat at her desk, laptop open. She stared at the folder labeled, Marissa 1989 to present. Inside, legal filings, scanned report cards, old emails from the FAFSA office, all proof of a presence long taken for granted. She hovered her mouse, right-clicked. A simple command appeared. Move to trash. No confetti. No sound cue. She clicked. The folder vanished with a soft whoosh like an exhale. Diane leaned back, her arms folding over her chest. It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like closing a file drawer on a case finally resolved. Not because justice had been served, but because the record had been corrected. The morning after Diane erased the Marissa 1989 to present folder from her computer, she opened a fresh legal file titled simply, Future Directives. No emotion, no attachments, just ink and intent. By noon, she was seated in her estate attorney's office, initials already marked on the revised copy of her will. The language was direct, unmistakable. Marissa Caldwell is to be included as beneficiary, contingent upon continued fulfillment of agreed personal terms and public acknowledgement of legal guardianship. No loopholes, no sentiment masked as suggestion. She signed at the bottom, her pen gliding with the confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime holding others accountable, finally extending the same to herself. She signed her name next to mine. Diane murmured, watching the notary seal the page, this time in ink that won't fade. The attorney glanced up. You sure about the conditions? I'm not interested in martyrdom, Diane said. Just memory, properly recorded. Later that week, while trimming her rose bushes, a ritual of quiet precision, her friend Lorna dropped by carrying lemon bars and news. I heard about the podcast, she said, settling into the porch chair beside her. You sounded like a woman who's finally been seen. Diane wiped her gloves on a towel. It's easier to be seen when you stop dimming your own light. Lorna hesitated. Aren't you afraid she'll forget again? That she'll go back to the old story? Diane smiled, not softly, but with edge. That's why I use ink, and court filings, and 6 backup folders. They both laughed, but Diane's tone didn't soften. I'm not afraid of being erased, Lorna. I know how to write myself back in. She made a donation that afternoon, $10,000, to a nonprofit legal aid fund focused on elder rights and estate recovery. The same kind of fund she once thought she'd never need. The irony didn't escape her. Neither did the satisfaction. And then came the invitation. A legal education conference. Keynote panel on family, finance, and female autonomy. Someone had passed her podcast episode to the committee. They didn't want an academic. They wanted her. The stage was set inside a university law building, tiered seats, hushed buzz, espresso-fueled note-takers. Diane stood in a charcoal pantsuit. No slides, no props, just a wireless mic and a clean voice. Her session was titled, When Love Becomes Litigation. She didn't speak in anger. She didn't recite her resume. She told a story, hers, of being a single mother, of becoming the aunt, of how erasure doesn't always come with malice. Sometimes it arrives wearing politeness, draped in avoidance. She paused only once, her voice catching. Mothers aren't born, she said, scanning the audience. They're built. And sometimes rebuilt, contractually. Laughter, applause, and at the end, a standing ovation. She stayed behind as attendees trickled out, law students, social workers, retired judges. Some shook her hand, one hugged her, but it was the young woman at the edge of the aisle, arms crossed protectively over her notebook, who lingered. She didn't introduce herself. She just leaned in and whispered, I think you just saved me. Diane drove home in silence, windows cracked. No music, just the spring wind, smelling of lilacs and clean paper. The house greeted her like an old friend, quiet, still, and completely hers. She walked into her office and opened the drawer labeled Legal Instruments. Behind the stack of revised trusts and notarized amendments, she slipped in a fresh manila folder titled Workshop Notes. And just below that, a post-it she scribbled quietly before bed. Not every mother is recognized, but some are recorded. The porch light was on. The cat blinked lazily at her arrival. Diane stepped inside, slipped off her heels, and poured chamomile tea with a hand that no longer trembled. A new kind of quiet filled the house, not loneliness, not absence, just space. The next morning, a message from her attorney blinked in bold at the top of her inbox. Subject, final confirmation. Case closed. Diane clicked. Her eyes scanned the lines slowly. Assets reconciled. Settlement terms fulfilled. Public acknowledgement archived. All claims and counterclaims resolved. Legal status sealed. No dramatic crescendo. No last-minute objections. Just a gavel's echo you couldn't hear but could feel in your bones. She exhaled, long and slow, and closed the laptop. Then she moved through the house, not with urgency, but precision. She dusted the sideboard, re-watered the orchids, smoothed the throw across the guest bed. Each motion stitched her closer to something final, something full. By late afternoon, Diane stood in the middle of her study. The sunlight fell across her desk like a spotlight. She pulled open the file drawer labeled Personal and flipped through the folders, fingertips brushing legacy and loss like pages in a diary. There was Estate Revised. There was Workshop Notes. And then at the very back, a single lavender tab. Peace. Empty. Just a placeholder. Just a promise. She closed the drawer softly, as if sealing a vault. Later, she made tea and stepped onto her back porch. The air smelled like warmed earth and lilac. A neighbor's wind chimes offered random harmonies. In the distance, a child laughed and a dog barked in return. She sipped quietly, not waiting for the world to notice her. It already had. When the kettle whistled again from the kitchen, she walked back inside. On the fridge hung one photo, just one. Marissa, at 5, a birthday crown slipping sideways on her head, cake on her chin. Diane's hand in the corner of the frame, steadying her. That was enough. No shrine, no grudge, just proof. That night, in the quiet hum of 9:52 p.m., she stood in the middle of her bedroom with a pen in her hand and a thought in her throat. She walked back to her desk, opened a new page in her personal journal. Final entry. There was a time I thought closure meant forgiveness, reunion, or some glittering emotional reunion with tears and hallmark lines. I know better now. Closure is paperwork. Closure is holding your boundary. Closure is finishing the story you were written out of without begging to be re-added. She took my name out loud. I took it back on paper. And that, finally, is enough. The camera would pan, if there were one. It would drift over the fireplace mantel, still bare. Over the locket now stored, not worn. Over the laptop's gentle hum and the single framed photo on the desk. Over the file cabinet's locked bottom drawer. Then it would rest, gently, lovingly, on the tab that remained. Peace. Flashback. Diane. Younger. Holding infant Marissa in a hospital blanket. Exhausted, unshowered, wearing the paper-thin robe the nurse insisted she put on. The baby presses against her chest. No words, no monologue, just Diane's breath, just the weight of being everything, for someone who wouldn't remember. Yet still, she held on. Now, older Diane smiles to herself in the dark, not because it's fixed, because it's recorded, because it's real, because at last, it's over. She whispered to herself, she renamed me once. But I never forgot who I was.